Joe, we might want to flip number 3 and number 4. Applicant for the first hearing is in here, so just FYI.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Moscow Board of Adjustments meeting for November 29th, 2022. Our first order of business is approval of minutes from June 8th. And I will say, because several of us weren't at that meeting that are here tonight, I learned today that you can vote on minutes. You also have the option to abstain if you want to, but if you found Scribner's and you feel like you want to vote, you can. So that said, anybody have any comments or corrections to those minutes?
No corrections.
I hear no corrections. That said, do I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
No second.
We have a second. So instead of saying all in favor, we're going to do a roll call, and we will start to my left. Steve.
A.
And I'm Joe, and I say yes.
I'm going to abstain.
Marshall?
Yeah.
Marshall will abstain.
I say aye.
Tim says aye. Jerry?
Abstain.
Jerry abstains. So we still pass unanimously, so to speak. Greetings.
Howdy. Sorry I'm late.
Oh, no problems. While our other team is getting settled, we have a new item that I want to bring to everyone's attention since we have such a huge crowd, but we do allow up to 15 minutes, any comments from anybody that isn't necessarily part of our agenda. Is there anybody that would like to come up and make any kind of statements or comments for our board, which I would probably defer to the city? But it is something that we now will address like any other council or P&Z meeting. Marshall.
I mean, why was this decided to do this? I mean, it's done at the council level.
Yeah, so, and typically it's usually P&Z that just allow for the public comment. I think Jennifer talked with city clerk just to provide consistency across all quasi-judicial boards, consistency in formatting, and giving the public the opportunity to speak at open meetings.
I mean, I'm not against it. It just seems like most comments would go
Yeah.
to the city council and.
Agreed.
Okay. Just curious.
Prior to going into the two CUPs that we have tonight, I would like to point out, and the city may actually have already dealt with this when we get into these two CUPs, but one of our 7 comments has to do with the nature of the area that it pertains to. And both of these are happening on the south side of town, where in the next few years, a lot of change is happening. So, and I mentioned this already, but I told Amy I would mention it during the meeting. That being said, both of these happen where we're going to have a new highway. SEL is building a huge building on that side of town where these are happening. So hopefully the city has a means of addressing that or has contemplated that with these CUPs, but it's something our board may be discussing tonight. And I just wanted to point that out, that is going to potentially be a very changing neighborhood here in the near future. So that said, we are going to, at the city's request, reverse or switch the order of items 3 and 4, and we'll actually start with the second CUP.
Good evening, Chairman and board members, members of the public. Thank you for having me here today. Switch over to the other presentation. Okay, so before you tonight, we have a conditional use permit for 2730 South Highway 95. The applicant, Doug and Melanie Wasson-Carey, have applied for a conditional use permit for an accessory cottage exceeding 100 square feet. The location is 2730 South Highway 95 in the area of city impact. The applicant is proposing to relocate an existing 2,400 square foot home which has been moved onto the site, and will be installed upon a newly constructed foundation. The applicant is proposing that this home will become the primary, and the current home that is already on the lot will become a 1,200 square foot accessory cottage. This is in the Ag Forest zoning district in the area of city impact, where accessory cottages above 900 square feet require conditional use permit. In the area of city impact, the City of Moscow's area agreement with Latah County, Moscow's Board of Adjustment is to conduct one public hearing and forward the recommendation onto Latah County. So this is the subject property. I think you're all quite familiar with the south end of town, as you had discussed earlier. This site in particular is a 13-acre parcel. It contains an existing one-bedroom, one-bathroom, single-family home, numerous accessory structures, and a portion of wash and carry construction. It's located just outside of the city limits, east of Highway 95, within the area of city impact. And adjacent properties to the west of the subject property include Wasson Carry Construction, owned by the applicant, Germer Construction, a new storage unit facility currently under construction. And adjacent properties to the north and east are owned by the state of Idaho and are currently under construction for the realignment of Highway 95. Lastly, property to the south is vacant land. Again, this is the site and area that we're discussing. As you can see, the highlighted in red is the proposed subject property and the surrounding areas. I don't know if this is on, which setting this is on, but there we go. So the highway realignment would be here. Germer Construction right out here to the west. This is the Wasson Carry site, and this is the vacant land. Wrong direction. So the comprehensive plan that for the City of Moscow land use growth map designates the subject property and surrounding properties as rural and agricultural. That is intended to allow continued uses for agricultural purposes with allowances for limited residential development and very low density lands with the where this designation should be preserved for agricultural use, and development should be directed to areas closer to the proximity of actively developed and serviced. Areas shown as agriculture and future land use planning are outside of the 10-year growth area and beyond the area of city, beyond the area which the city is prepared to provide adequate facilities and services during the horizon of this plan. Generally, these are found around the area of impact. Residential development options allow septic well and septic public water where applicable and warranted, very low densities consistent with the intended agricultural character. Appropriate current zoning for lands with this designation are ag forest, which this property is zoned, and farm ranch, outdoor ranch. The 2019 City of Moscow Comprehensive Plan Community Mobility section identifies Highway 95 as a national highway. As stated before, the zoning of the subject property is agricultural forestry. The parcel to the west business and industrial. And they're all also located in Moscow's area of impact. Within the area of impact, the county's ag forest zone has been adopted. According to Latah County zoning code, the ag forest district is to establish and achieve purposes of the ordinance and the goals of the policies of the Latah County Comprehensive Plan by accommodating, providing, and the continuation of agricultural and forest land uses. Uses allowed in this zone include those that are integral to agriculture and forestry, uses which will not conflict with accepted farm and forest practices, and uses which will not result in excessive conversion of productive farmland and forest land, to uses which can be more appropriately located in other zoning designations and which are consistent with Idaho's Agricultural Protection Act. The accessory cottages in excess of 900 square feet require a conditional use permit, as I stated before. And this is part of Latah County Code 31214H. This is a image of the zoning that I discussed. Ag forest as subject property, industrial for Wasson Carry's construction. The storage facility that's currently under construction is the motor business section to the west. Streets and access of the subject property. It's accessed via Highway 95, which is a 25-foot wide paved road with northbound and southbound travel lanes with minimal gravel shoulders on both sides. Highway 95 is anticipated to become the jurisdiction of the city of Moscow with the completion of the Idaho Department of Transportation's Thorn Creek project. So this is the proposed site plan provided by the applicant. As you can see, up on the northern part of the property, this is where the current single-family home sits, the one-bedroom, one-bath. This will become the accessory cottage of 1,200 square feet. This is the location where the new primary residence of 2,400 square feet will be situated on a permanent foundation. As you can see, both are accessed off of a private drive, allowing a loop configuration for vehicular access. Both have well and septic. This is an image of the current single-family home that is the proposed accessory cottage that is existing on the site. And this will be the new single-family home once it is installed on a new foundation, if approved. Latah County zoning standards. As far as Latah County planning and zoning requirements, this meets all those requirements, and anything additional the county will look at the time of permitting building applications to make sure it meets all pertinent requirements. So staff recommendation tonight is that the City of Moscow Board of Adjustment put forth a recommendation, or conduct public hearing, consider public testimony presented, and put forth a recommendation of approval for the proposed conditional use permit for an accessory cottage exceeding 900 square feet located at 2730 South Highway 95 to Latah County Zoning Commission with no conditions. And then direct staff to prepare relevant criteria and standards based upon your decision. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions you might have.
I have one before I let anybody else ask. The 900 square foot, that doesn't seem like a very large space. Did that include the deck too, or is that just the actual exterior wall
So
footprint?
the accessory cottage is proposed to be 1,200 square feet. 900 square feet is the limitation that Latah County has for accessory cottages that they can build by right. Anything over 900 square feet requires a conditional use permit. So given that they are proposing a 1,200 square foot accessory cottage, that's why the conditional use permit is required.
But this is still an existing condition. They're not building it new there.
It is an existing structure. It's a current single family. Currently, I believe that single family residence is only 600 square feet.
Okay.
They plan to do an addition and expand it to 1,200. I think the applicant can speak a little bit more to that.
Okay. Any other, Marshall, question?
Amy, a couple questions might not pertain to this directly, but a question I had. By definition, is an accessory cottage supposed to be occupied by a relative?
Not necessarily. As far as, and I believe that the county has the same provisions as the city does, and Maura, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the city requires that at least one of the structures is owner occupied for at least 6 months out of the year. I believe the county has, you don't have that same requirement. Okay. County requirements will differ.
Yes, sir.
I don't know, ask Mari or Amy, but is there a distance required that for an accessory cottage to be so close to the main home?
There is, and Maura can speak to this too if you'd like. But in this case, they are able to administratively waive the distance if there's a better suitable location for the accessory cottage. And in this case, I think the county saw fit that the distance was able to be a little bit further than standard requires for strategic placement.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
I have a question. Once again, I don't know if it's best for staff or for the applicant, but I was looking at page 304 under criteria 6, under proposed use meets all applicable development standards of the zoning code. It was written in as a reply, use will meet all aspects of the accessories cottage. And then it says requesting variances for distance I don't believe there's a variance request in this application though.
I think it's just a matter of terminology. There's not necessarily a variance request.
Okay,
It is something that the county can do administratively, and there's no need for a variance.
okay.
Any other questions?
Nope, they've answered mine.
All right. Thank you, Amy. With that, I open it up for a public hearing. Would the applicant care to come up and speak to this CUP? State your name and address into the microphone and tell us what you want.
Doug Wassencarry, part owner of Wassencarry Construction, and I live at that site, 2730, I believe. We moved out there and built a 600 square foot little home, and with the intentions of building something bigger at some point in time. That house was built sometime in the 1880s, 1890s, prior to 1900. And
Which house, sir? I'm sorry.
the house in particular that we're going to put on the foundation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it used to sit down by the trees by the bridge. It was kind of verbally given to me about 25 to 30 years ago when we had enough land to put it up there. The owner passed away. The sons got a hold of it when the highway bought the land around it. We had a chance to pick it up and bring it up to our place. And at the same time, we bought property to put it on. The actual intentions was that it was going to move on to the next piece of property and be sold. But nothing has happened out there, and we couldn't take it over there. We could store it on our place, but we couldn't take it over on the adjoining property. And our plan is to take about 3 to 4 years, let the crews work on it during the winter time and put it together, get it on a foundation next spring, re-roof it before winter, and then eventually move into it. In the meantime, I guess the square footage is about 2,400 square foot, which allows us to add on to the one we live in up to 1,200 square foot. Has something to do with half the square footage. And then that will become the accessory cottage or mother-in-law apartment or whatever. And I think we're allowed like a yard man's house out there, which we've never had. I guess it's us. But that's our intentions anyway. We can put a septic in. We have a 60-gallon plus a minute well there, which I believe when we did the paperwork, it come out at 38 gallons a minute. That's what the state allowed us or something like that. And we'll just take that water across from our house over to the new one. That's what we want to do.
Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, Doug, on the access to the property, I know when I inspected your house you're living in now.
Yeah.
If I didn't know the property, it was difficult to find, like for emergency services. Are you going to upgrade the access at all or anything?
I have been working on that right now. The piece of road between us and the storage units is actually owned by Steve Clyde. And we have a forever easement to our property on it. We purchased 160 feet of right of way several years ago at the top of it going into the field. And then there is a temporary easement through the piece we just purchased to the back side behind Early Bird in case something fails and he gets the property back or gets the back end of the property back, then we have to give him that easement. Should the guy develop everything out there and there's no failures, then that property reverts to us. And so we have our own roads up there to get up there.
I have a question. Isn't that easement that you're going to be using the same easement that gives the access to the storage units?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you had an agreement with those folks to be able to use that same access.
We, if I remember correctly, they bought their piece of property first, and in their purchase, they have a use or an easement on that strip of land that comes in from the highway. We bought ours second, and then we developed ours first to get in there. And it has been, we've been approached about purchasing that piece of property, but we've got a forever use of it. I don't know why we would want to own it. I don't know why anybody would want to own it. Some point in time, it may wind up becoming a street. You know, don't know. I know there was an issue years ago when we first got out there and everybody was after us to keep it fenced and all kinds of things like that. And we tried to get a permit to put a building on a foundation. And the city required that we put curbs and sidewalks in from the highway, eventually pave it, put trees in, all that kind of stuff. And an attorney friend of mine went to the city and came back and said, it's all taken care of. You don't have to do any of that. And we got our permit. So I don't know what transpired. I have no idea. Never got a bill for that time. But apparently he had fun doing what he did. But
What's his name again?
yeah.
So I have one other question.
Yes.
So essentially, the reason that you did the application is the fact that there's nothing to do with the new home, the old farmhouse that you're putting on that site. There's really nothing that we're here about with that. What we're trying to talk about here is the building that you're living in. You're going to increase the size of it, which is going to be more than 900 square feet.
Yes.
Putting it to 1,200 square feet, and that's going to be the accessory building that you need to CP
If we did not have the house there, my understanding is we could walk in and get a permit and add on to our house.
right.
But because we intend on putting the big house on there and we're allowed 2 residences there, being that it's bigger, one of them has to be less than half the square foot. That's the way I understand it. And so we have to do it all together. In other words, we want to get the house on the foundation, but next summer we're going to build an addition on on our little house, make it bigger. And we're limited to the square footage that we can create there.
Okay. So this SUP really it's for, or the CUP, it's really for the accessory house and has nothing really to do with the new farmhouse that you're putting
I
there.
believe it's to allow us to have the big house set up. That's what we
Okay.
intended when we went up to do it.
So it's kind of concurrent because there's now going to be 2 residents on the property. One will be the primary and one has
Right.
to become the accessory. So in a way, you are correct. It is to expand the accessory cottage, but because there will be 2 residents, in order for it to fit Latell County Code, one has to be defined as primary, one as an accessory.
Yeah. And the way I understood it is if we took what will be the accessory one, the one we're living in, if we were to build it to greater than 4,800 square feet, then we could put that house in there because it's half as the size. I think that's how I believed it.
It's the lesser of the 2.
Yeah.
So it would be limited at the 1,500.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
He just needed to put a bigger house.
We've been comfortable in the little one.
There's some
until,
storage units
our
available,
dog
I hear.
took it over and decided that we needed something.
What happened to your grain silo idea?
It's still there. It's still there. The problem that I have with it is the square footage will be too big. So the new addition may look like a grain silo when we build it. We may try to copy or follow the one that's on the top of the Lewiston grade, only a little bigger. But we still want to do something like that.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Would any of our audience care to come and speak in favor, neutral, or against this CUP?
I'm in favor. He's a good neighbor.
Fair enough. Well, with that, I guess I'll close the public hearing and open it up for the board. Anybody care to, Marshall?
Yeah, sure. Well, Joe, I think it makes sense to me, whether it's 900 square feet or 1,200 square feet, it's still going to be a structure there. And it just seems to make sense to do this. I think, the county, I'm sure Mari has gone over it with a fine tooth comb and let you figured out all your septic and all your access and what you can and can't do. But as far as the increase in size for the accessory cottage, it makes sense to me.
Any other comments?
As
far as comment, I just always like to see people, private sector, look for ways to maintain and keep historic buildings. So I'm really happy to see the project, and I hope they have success with the
Well, no,
historic
that's,
house.
it's a reuse of both structures.
Yeah.
So, this just seems like a formality. It makes sense to me as well. Yes.
So I guess I would move to recommend to the Lake Tahoe County Commissioners approval of the conditional use permit with no conditions.
I'll second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Let's, I'm used to saying all in favor. Jerry,
Aye.
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 that was Tim and Marshall and
Aye.
Steve. Tim. And I say aye as well. So that is a unanimous decision. The COP is approved and
Also, Joe, I would move that we ask staff to prepare the relevant criteria and standards and findings for us to
okay.
at a future meeting.
So Marshall has given us a motion for that. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Jerry. Can I roll call again, or can we just? All in favor?
Aye.
That was unanimous, and I knew it would be, so. There we go.
That would have been strange if it wasn't.
I would have started all over. Okay. Amy,
Mark,
Take us
how
to the
did-
second
How
one.
did you
Thanks.
have the privilege of coming tonight?
My CUP is on the county end, so I get to come sit through and then move forward at the next level.
This is what she likes to do in her spare time.
She does what? Who's she? She's the county planner or something?
Okay, so tonight, for you, we have our second hearing. It's a conditional use permit for a temporary RV park located at 2805 South Highway 95. The applicant is proposing a temporary RV park for under 10 RVs located at 2805 South Highway 95. The facility is proposed to be located on the northern portion of a 2.2 acre parcel. The subject property is located also within the Ag Forest zoning district in the area of city impact, where RV parks are a conditional use for the area city impact agreement with Latah County. In the area city impact, per the City of Moscow's area city impact agreement with Latah County, Moscow's Board of Adjustment is to again conduct one hearing and forward a recommendation on to Latah County. So the site and area land use, as I said, is 2.2 acres. It is just outside the city limits. Currently contains a single-family residence as well as 3 accessory structures. Is east of Highway 95 is vacant land. And to the north, south, and west is property owned by Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories. It has 436 feet of frontage along Highway 95. And here is an aerial of the subject. Far south of the screen is the subject property here. Schweitzer, as you're all familiar with, is the property that completely surrounds to the north, west, and south, and across from the subject property. Across the highway is vacant land. So the comprehensive plan, again, for the City of Moscow, land use growth plan map designates the subject property and the surrounding properties as rural and agricultural. In that area, it's intended to allow continued use for agricultural purposes with allowances for limited residential development at very low densities. Land with this designation should be preserved for agricultural use, and development should be directed to areas closer to the proximity of the city where municipal utilities are available and land can be effectively developed and serviced. Areas shown in the agricultural on the future land use plan are outside of the 10-year growth area referred to in Chapter 5, and beyond the area for which the city is prepared to provide adequate facilities and services during the horizon of this plan. Generally, these are found around the periphery of the city and throughout the area of impact. The residential development options allow septic and well, and septic and public water where applicable and warranted at very low densities, consistent with the intended agricultural character. Appropriate current zones for these designated areas are ag forest and farm ranch and outdoor ranch. The 2019 comprehensive plan also identifies Highway 95 as a national highway. And the zoning of the subject property is ag forest. Properties to the north, south, and west are zone motor business, and those are within the city of Moscow. Within the city within the area of impact, the county's ag forest zone has been adopted. And the Latah County Zoning Code, Ag Forest District is established to provide or to achieve the purposes of this ordinance and the goals and the policies of Latah County Comprehensive Plan by accommodating, providing opportunities for, and the continuation of agriculture and forest land uses. Uses allowed in the zone include those that are integral to agricultural growth and forestry, uses which will not conflict with accepted farm and forest practices, and uses which will result in the excessive conversion of productive farm and forest lands to uses which can be more appropriately located in other zoning designations and which are consistent with Idaho's Agricultural Protection Act. Here's an image of the zoning as we discussed. Ag forest is in gray. As you can see, motor business is in that brown area. Streets and access. The subject property is accessed via Highway 95, which is a 24-foot paved roadway with northbound and southbound travel lanes and minimal gravel shoulders on both sides. Again, the highway is anticipated to become the jurisdiction of the city of Moscow upon completion of the Thorn Creek project. This is a closer aerial of the subject property. As I stated before, the temporary RV park is proposed to be on the northern portion of the lot, up in this area, accessed off of the driveway here off of Highway 95. This is the subject property street view. I'm sure many of you have driven by it multiple times, heading in and out of town. This is the driveway access off of Highway 95 and the single family that exists on the subject property. And this is the proposed site plan provided by the applicant. As you can see, access again is here. Oops, wrong button. Access is here off of Highway 95, allowing circulation through the property and then exiting out the same egress. Latah County RV standards are that the location of all existing and proposed structures that the site plan provide the location of all existing and proposed structures within the development, the location and precise nature of the landscaping, and the contents in the statement regarding the proposed maintenance of the maintenance program. Location of the lots and spaces subject to the following requirements. They need to be a minimum of 40 by 20. However, up to 40% of the spaces can be a minimum of 25 by 20. Designation of the spaces shall be such that they are spaced between recreational vehicles is at least 10 feet. Continuing on, toilet facilities and potable water shall be provided in all parks that allow recreational vehicles which are not self-contained. And the location of solid waste receptacles need to be provided within 150 feet of all recreational vehicles. Alignment and grade for any storm and sewer, spacing and numbering of all RV spaces, and the location of septic, location and specific nature for open areas and playground equipment, if any. The applicant provided a site plan that does show the placement of these RVs that does meet these standards, and the RVs will all be self-contained and within 100 feet of solid waste receptacles. So the city's recommendation this evening is that the City of Moscow, or the Board of Adjustment, conducts a public hearing, and upon consideration of testimony received, put forth a recommendation of approval for the proposed conditional use permit for the temporary RV park located at 2805 South Highway 95 with a term of no longer than 3 years to the Latah County Zoning Commission with one condition, and that is that the driveway surface should be constructed to support the weight of a fire apparatus in all weather conditions. And then if the board would direct staff to prepare relevant criteria and standards based on your decision. And I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
I have a couple, then I'll, Marshall. Two things that I would just like clarification on. One having with the apparatus, which clearly is a safety thing I really don't have an issue with, but in order to support that, that implies heavy duty asphalt in that whole area. But this is also for 3 years. And so that's kind of a permanent non-permeable surface for a temporary CUP. Can you clarify why?
Absolutely. So given that it is for such a long term and it is considered temporary, The fire department did feel that it was important that they are able to access that year round, just in case there is any fire in any portion of that property. Part of that is maintaining a hard surface that those fire trucks can maneuver around in there. Latah County at the time of permitting will make sure that it meets their requirements as far as compaction. And that's something that they will do at the time of issuing their permits.
Okay. And then the other thing that I kind of know the answer to this. I'm going to ask it anyway, just so that everyone knows, because we talked earlier. The purpose for the 3-year is that recreational would oftentimes imply that this is just used on football weekends or something, kind of like the one further south on the west side or east side of the highway. But you had mentioned that this might actually have some permanent residency with construction workers, which was the reason for the 3-year.
Correct. So in the application, the applicant had stated that the reason why he is putting forth this proposal is to provide temporary housing for construction crews that are working on that Thorn Creek project. The city hearing that and realizing that, and the applicant having no intent on making it a permanent placement for these RVs, we felt that 2 years was probably a reasonable time to allow for this use, but giving 3 years as an additional cushion, depending on, if that project were to run a little longer.
Okay. Other questions? Marshall?
Yeah, Amy, could you clarify a couple of things for me?
Sure.
Number one, you said that the driveway needed to be a hard surface. Is that driveway defined as just the access to the highway, or is it for the
It's the entire
driveway
loop
for the
around.
whole?
Correct. It would be the entire loop around so that when those fire apparatuses get back there, they're not stuck, that they can maintain the integrity all the way around and they're able to access all spaces on the site.
Okay. And then another question, you mentioned that this recommendation go to Latah County Planning and Zoning. Wouldn't it go to the commissioners?
It would go to the commissioners. Isn't it?
It can actually go to either via the code. It can go to planning or to the zoning commission or the board of commissioners, whichever hearing body is meeting first.
Okay, but typically it goes directly to the commissioners, right?
Correct. You can meet one.
And what happens if there's an appeal?
It goes through the commissioner's appeal process.
Okay,
Through the reconsideration process.
great. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Mark.
Just for clarification, we could all hear Mari.
Yes.
I don't know if.
That was Mari
if the
Knott.
radio
Yeah.
could, if you could just kind of.
Absolutely. So that
summarize
was
what-
Maury Knott from the Latah County Planning Department, confirming that it does go to either the Planning Commission or Planning and Zoning, depending on who meets first. Also clarifying that if there is an appeal, it does go to the commissioners.
Thank you.
And Mari's got a loud enough mouth.
We could strike that comment,
Yeah.
but it's already been published.
Apologies from the board.
Any other questions for staff?
Me later.
I have a question.
Jerry?
Did you say in the presentation that the motor business is already in the city?
Correct.
Okay, so-
That was annexed when the Schweitzer rezone happened with that property.
And you may or may not be able to answer the next question. This created an island of non-conforming in this. Is that because of the private and the applicant didn't want to go into that at that time?
It does and it doesn't. So the property across the highway is still area city impact. So there is still some connected property that is part of the area city impact and not yet annexed into the city. Oftentimes when property owners are approached or when somebody's proposing an annexation, as you probably know, adjoining properties are all contacted at that time and asked if they were interested in annexing as well. I'm not sure if the applicant was approached at the time of annexation for Schweitzer. He could probably speak more to that. But typically that's how that process works.
Okay, thank you.
Amy, on page 5 of 7, under Latah County RV park requirements, RV parks are subject to the following requirements. And then subparagraph A, second sentence, the planning department can waive the requirement for engineering if the park is small enough or environmental conditions do not oppose any problems for the site. I didn't read anywhere. I assume that normally there would obviously be some requirements for engineering when you develop a site, but I don't see anywhere further on where it states that they did waive that.
I believe that, and Maury can speak to this if you'd like, but I do believe that the county has waived that requirement since it
Okay.
is for a temporary use.
Okay.
So I have one question. You had mentioned that they thought that the construction or this process would probably take a couple of years, but the thought was to add another year. Is this conditional use permit based on the time frame of the highway, and say that the highway is done and this CUP would expire?
So
Or
the
is it-
CUP will expire at the time upon the 3 years, unless the applicant chooses to apply for a renewal. I can't speak to the timeline of the Thorn Creek project. From my knowledge, that project's been proposed for so many years that it's actually taking place now. I mean, who knows how long that project can take. But I will say that if the applicant chooses to reapply to extend, it would just have to be an amendment to the existing conditional use permit.
Okay.
Jerry?
Tagging off of that, if this was to be annexed by the city under the conditional use permit, then it would come back to the city for a renewal? Or would that, as a condition of, I guess it would be a condition of the annexation, that we would accept it as is and then?
At that time, if this property were annexed and the property owner did go through that process, I'd have to look back through code and see how that would be handled. Oftentimes, when there's an existing non-conforming use, it's allowed to continue as is. And so, in this case, we'd have to look at what it looks like at that point. Typically, that's the way that that would be addressed. However, the board at that time could put conditions on it if you felt necessary.
But the annexation, if it was to be annexed, wouldn't go through the board, it would go
It would go through
the
the Planning and
city
Zoning Commission, yes.
Commission first, okay. And they deal with RV parks, okay.
Correct,
I'm okay with
yep.
that.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Thank you, Amy. With that said, do we have the app? Are you the applicant? Could you come up and tell us about your application? State your name and address in the mic.
Yeah, Neil Marzoff, married to Ramey Rose Atterbury. She's, I guess, the title owner of the land. I'm her slave. And anyway, our address 2805 Highway 95, south in Moscow, Idaho 83843. So the realization was that we used to own our house on Reisenhower Hill. We saw a lot of people get damaged on our hill, and we saw that truck driver. I was the last person to talk to him when he died on that hill. And we have been very pro the new highway of 95 for 15 years now. And so when they started actually doing construction, we were pretty excited. But of course, by that point, I had purchased 2805 Highway 95 and sold 3455 Highway 95. And I was excited to see the new highway being built. So my first order was to make sure that the people had a good place to stay. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of RV parks here in Moscow. So we have a lot of construction workers working on the highway that are driving to Colton and to Colfax to stay. So I offered my property up for some RVers that were construction workers working on the highway to be able to stay. Once I did that, I didn't charge them anything. I offered it for free because I believe that building a new highway is what's best for our city and our county and the safety of the people that are driving that road. So I offered my property up. We had, I don't know, eight people that chose to stay there. Diatley has installed their own power system, their own water system. It didn't cost me anything other than to let people park on my land. I felt that was a good use of our property and a good way to help the city of Moscow. Unfortunately, I got a letter that said I had to develop or create some kind of RV park in order to let people stay on my land. So that's what I did. And so that's where we're at today, is I'm just trying to do a good thing for our city and for the people that are trying to build this road so we have a safer highway so that people don't get killed going up and down that terrible road that's there right now. Having said that, I want you guys to approve this because I just want to get this project done. Now, the downside is I'm going to have to put a lot of rock and all kinds of other stuff on my property so that these people could, fire trucks and all that could get around. And I've got to put some markers up that say space 1, 2, 3, whatever. And I'm willing to do that. There's a cost there to me. So, but I'm still willing to do that. And at the end of this whole thing, I'll try to figure out how to get all this rock off my property, plant the trees, because I want to put an orchard out there. That's what I really want, so that I can retire and pick apples. So anyway, that's where we're at right now. And that's what you guys have to decide on today, is whether or not you're going to allow that to happen for the next 3 years so that these guys could live close to their job and get their job done and get this highway built so that we could quit killing people on this damn highway. So that's where I'm at. Any question?
Any questions for Neil?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any of our two other audience members care to speak for, against, or neutral to this? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, open it up for deliberations. I will say my wife actually drives that same highway 5 days a week, and so I do appreciate, and so does she, a better road. Marshall?
Well, Bradbury said something that was very pertinent, that there are very few motor vehicle spots around the city of Moscow.
Right.
The ones to create one in Moscow is very onerous. They've got a lot of criteria that you have to follow, and this is in the area of city impact. It's temporary, and I would like to see more permanent ones show up in the city of Moscow and in Latah County. And I think it's a good thing you're doing, allowing these people to have a place to park, during the construction time. So I'm in favor of it. I think it's a good thing. I had a quick question for Mari, if it's okay, Joe.
Sure.
Mari. So Latah County ordinance doesn't a person with private property have a right to stay on the property for, what is it, 6 months out of a 12-month period without any restrictions?
Correct. For just a single RV though, and it would have to be owner or family occupied 6 months out of any 12-month period. We do have a new provision that's actually not been adopted in the area of impact yet that also allows for up to 2 years if you have an active building permit, but that has not been adopted in the area of impact at this time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark.
No problem. And just for clarification, so a paved surface, and I think Mr. Atterbury clarified that in his testimony too, that the county design standards would not require a paved surface, but it would have to be a compacted rock surface that handles the
perfect.
weight of fire apparatuses.
Okay.
So, which we do regularly in the county. So any other questions before I sit down?
No, but I'm actually glad you clarified
For
that.
those of
'cause
you that I've not
oftentimes,
met, I am Mari
from my
Nottis.
design end, we always get hammered on heavy duty apparatus and big heavy fire trucks, and it needs to be heavy duty asphalt, not just regular asphalt. So I'm actually
Right.
glad you clarified.
Well, we run log trucks and grade trucks in the county on rock. So,
Perfect.
and for those of you that I haven't met, I'm Mari Knott. I'm the senior planner for Latah County. So nice to see all of you here tonight. Thank you.
For clarification, I just want to add that actually Neil's name is Marzoff, not Atterbury. That's his wife.
Okay.
So
Oh, I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Marzoff.
What was that? Oh, never mind. I don't think it's relevant, is it?
Um,
Any other comments?
yeah, I'd like to say as a park owner in Moscow who is going through those onerous requirements to actually create RV spaces. I think this is a fabulous thing. So
I agree. And honestly, if the Vandals keep riding this, you just, every football season, just maybe keep that there. Who knows? Any other?
do it before the city annexes you.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, no, I appreciate the clarification on the asphalt versus the crushed rock, because that was a significant difference in my mind. And I was afraid the applicant was led to believe one thing, and so I'm glad that's been clarified. That's all. I think it's a great thing. Yeah.
Right, pure emotion in that?
If I may, I move that we accept or make a recommendation to the Lathrop County, with the condition, or to approve with the condition of the driveway surface that can withstand fire apparatus.
Okay, so I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second?
Oh, let me add that on approval that the staff will be directed to write the relevant.
There we
Here
go. There's an even better motion. Two in one shot. So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second. We'll start the other end. Tim,
I'm going to recuse myself.
okay,
On a relationship with Neil.
fair enough. Steve?
Aye.
Marshall?
Aye.
Jerry? And I say aye as well. So we have 5 ayes, 1 abstention, and the motion passes. And it also included that staff provide our relevant criteria and standards and findings of fact. With that said, we are down to basically any other business. Do we have anything forthcoming?
I've got a real quick question.
Yes.
If you don't mind, Amy, is okay. Maury, on the Lathrop County Planning and Zoning Commission, when you have a public hearing for a conditional use permit or variance, does staff write the relevant criteria and standards and findings on that? Or you don't have to stand up?
That is correct. We do write, at the county level, we call them findings of fact and conclusions of law. We do prepare those, whether it is before the zoning commission or before the board of commissioners. However, when there is a recommendation coming from the city, for a conditional use permit, assuming whichever hearing body hears it and they accept the city's recommendation in full, we will actually adopt your relevant criteria. We do not actually prepare a whole new. The only time we do that is if they choose to have their own hearing or make a change in the recommendation.
Okay, thanks.
Did
Sorry.
that answer your
Oh,
question?
no, that's. So I believe we have a meeting set up for these minutes.
Tentatively, I think it was set for the 8th. However, there was some question about attendance for a quorum. If I get a show of hands, of who could show up for a 5 o'clock meet at 5:30, is it 5:30 or 5:15?
I can make the 5:30 meetings now.
5:30 in mayor's conference.
And the 8th, that's Thursday, correct?
Thursday, correct.
Just me?
Joe's the only one.
I don't make a quorum. Steve and I. So.
We may have to-
Do we have a different date?
We may have to relook at the calendar. Would you mind sending out an email? We'll just get that scheduled at a later date. That way you guys can all look at your calendars as well.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Then anything
Nothing else from
else
staff.
forthcoming? Well, good, because the holidays are going to come quick, fast and furious. So
I move the meeting be adjourned.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I have multiple seconds. All in favor? Aye. That is unanimous. Good evening, everybody.
What is the status of the road anyhow? What's the latest? Is it?